There's certainly a big story on our radar. Public hearings for Eskom's 20.5% tariff hike application kicking off at the National Energy Regulator of South Africa yesterday. That's NERSA. Western Cape stakeholders telling NERSA that the proposed tariff hike is way above inflation and is therefore unaffordable. Now, Eskom has defended this steep increase, blaming carbon taxes and rising costs from independent power producers. Let's get you some analysis on the story. Energy expert and University of Johannesburg physics professor, Professor Harmut Winkler, joins us via our video link this morning. Prof, it's great to have you with us here on the program on a story that gives us all heart palpitations, the possibility of a 20.5% tariff increase. So obviously we can't argue with Eskom the fact that they do need the money, but does it have to come from the consumer?
It either comes from the consumer or it effectively comes from the government, because that is who ultimately funds Eskom. If Eskom doesn't get the money, well, they certainly do run the risk of actually not being able to operate at all. Unfortunately, Eskom at the moment is absolutely essential for the country, and that's why somehow or other it's got to be kept on going. So the question is, how does one fund it? And let's also not forget that Eskom has got enormous debts at the moment. It's of the order of 500 billion or so. So Eskom is a very deep financial hole, and they're trying to use this as one of the means of getting out of it.
Yeah.
It's the debate of how does one actually fund it? Does one make the people who use the electricity pay, which is effectively what would happen if they get their increase, or alternatively, the money comes just from a grant, from an extra bailout from government, in which case the money comes from the taxpayer, so that would be everybody else's paying. So, but somehow or other, I think Eskom are going to get at least some of that money. What happened last year is that they initially didn't get it, and then they went to court, and in the end they got the full amount that they required. But we're now seeing the outcome of many years of wasteful expenditure, the effects of Eskom being allowed to drag themselves into this hole. And I'm afraid, yes, electricity increases, it's way above inflation, and the cost of electricity is much higher than anybody would like.
Yeah. Prof, you talk about the dire straits that Eskom is in financially, and we know that. We've been talking about it for many, many years when we were covering the costs of the construction of Medupi and Kusile Power Station, and the other issues insofar as mismanagement and corruption are concerned. So yeah, that's a fact. Eskom is in a bad way financially. But again, I'm going to ask you the question, should government not be coming to the party here? Because in as much as Eskom needs the money to function, South Africans just can't afford it.
Yes, well that's correct. And there's no doubt that Eskom could cut a lot on its expenditure. Its staffing at the moment is much higher than it was, say, 10 years ago, and yet the electricity output that Eskom produces is actually lower. Right now we're in a situation where a large number, at any given moment, a large number of its power plants are not operational, largely because they are old, they're breaking down much more than they should be. And yes, hence we have this situation where Eskom is effectively not a functional business. They're being kept alive by when in fact they really can't do it on their own. So yes, well, government can come in, but then again it means everybody's paying for electricity expenses of those people who are maybe even abusing the system. So the money's got to come from somewhere. So the question is, yes, do we make the people who actually use a lot of electricity pay more, or do we make the people, everybody, share with it? Bear in mind that these increasing costs have had the effect that more and more people have tried to make their alternative provisions, usually by installing solar power panels. And where the people have had the funding to do this, then those operations effectively often don't even need Eskom anymore. And the question is, do they then also end up paying for all these extra increases when they've already invested a lot of money for making their own separate provisions. So that's the kind of question that one's sitting with at the moment.
Prof, what do you make of Eskom's argument that this steep increase is due to carbon taxes and rising costs from independent power producers? Does that justify the application?
No, those are relatively small factors which are not the major reason for why this increase is happening. As far as the increasing costs from power producers, the only thing that's happened is that a couple of new solar and wind plants have come online. So effectively, they need a little bit more money to pay for the extra electricity that they're getting now. It's not that the actual prices of the solar and wind have gone up dramatically. Those only go up according to inflation. In fact, the most recent plants are also the cheapest. The oldest solar plants are the ones that the Eskom is contractually obliged to pay more for. So those increases are inflation related every year. They are not the factor that's actually making it necessary for this increase. The real reason is that, yes, Eskom is just simply, this is Eskom's current operating costs. If they are unable to lower that, and yes, most of it will go into expenses such as salaries and into repairs of the current plants. I mean, that's what's really costing them. Oh, and we shouldn't forget about the diesel, which comes in every time when supplies run very low. Going to diesel is the last resort before load shedding, and whenever that happens, diesel is expensive, so that's what costs Eskom a lot. So that's where a lot of the money is going to. It's not going for paying for additional amounts for these other factors.
Yeah,
although carbon taxes are going to become more and more as we go along. That's certainly true.
Yeah, it takes us back to the issue of mismanagement. Let me thank you for your time, Professor Hartmut Winkler, as we continue to unpack the story around that tariff increase that's been applied for by Eskom, 20.5%, public hearings kicking off yesterday. In fact, in the Western Cape, the mayor there in the city of Cape Town saying that the point of departure for this tariff hike shouldn't be Eskom's return on assets, but rather what people can afford should be in line with inflation at around 5.5%. It's a big story we're tracking for you here on the program.